Welcome to the HEARTS Entwined podcast. In this podcast, we'll be having discussions around the secrets which attract lasting, healthy, fulfilling relationships, creating a healthy mindset, and what women should know and understand about men. Introducing your host, Lyn Smith, the Queen of Hearts, relationship expert, trainer, speaker, and best-selling author of the Cupid's Bow technique. Lyn's mission is to have a positive impact in reducing divorce, domestic violence, and suicide.
Welcome to the HEARTS Entwined podcast. This is your host, Lyn Smith, the Queen of Hearts. And today, listeners, I just thought, you know what, it's about time I did a podcast that's just with me delivering what I do in the way that I do it. For those of you that have been subscribing and sharing for a long time, that have been with me, you know, since my early days, I used to do quite a lot of my own podcasts. Then thank you so much. I really appreciate you. You know, it really means a lot. And if you're new to the podcast, welcome, subscribe and join our tribe, because, you know, we're here for you every week and we have some phenomenal guests on the show, as well as I do my best to deliver some high quality words of wisdom that you can implement in your daily lives to help you attract or create your ultimate healthy, lasting soulmate relationships. And the reason why we don't actually have that currently in our lives, if this applies to you right now, is largely to do with our own mindsets. You know, it is our own mindsets that can get in the way of us achieving that lasting, healthy soulmate relationship, because we actually get what we focus on, and where focus goes, energy flows. So, you know, if we're focusing on negative things, and sometimes we're doing this, you know, without even realizing that that's what we're doing, then obviously that energy is going to be something that we attract as our reality. And then you're going to be living in an environment that isn't comfortable for you, and you'll wonder why, you know, that is. And largely it is down to our mindset. So what do I actually mean by that, and how can I give you sort of like a practical example? Well, quite often when I speak to a lot of my clients, you know, if I give you a practical example, recently, one of my clients says one of the things that she does quite often focus on is that, you know, there are no good men out there, for example. Yeah, I don't think that was their exact words, but, you know, it was around that she didn't believe there were any good men out there. And she's a woman of a certain age, and I'm also a woman of a certain age. I still managed to attract a healthy, lasting soulmate relationship. So, you know, it doesn't come down to age. It literally does come down to quite often what we think, and being conscious and more aware about what we actually think, you know, because they do have, our thoughts do have a positive or negative impact on our lives. So, for example, with this particular client, she was focused on the fact that there are no good men out there. So, you know, that was her negative thought around her current situation. So therefore she has a negative expectation around that, you know, without even realizing it. She's creating that negative expectation, and then what automatically sort of kicks in on around that negative expectation is that we engage in self-defeating behaviors around that particular thought. And then, of course, you know, we create that self-fulfilling prophecy of having that poor outcome play out in our lives. So then she's likely to attract somebody that affirms that there are no good men out there, because she either attracts a poor relationship or she doesn't attract any relationship at all and remains single. So you can see now that, you know, what we focus on definitely creates our current reality. Whereas if you have a positive thought, you know, such as, you know, I always attract wonderful men, and I have my choice, you know, of guys that I can date at any moment in my life, And you might not necessarily believe that 100%, because that hasn't been your reality up to now. But if you start to sort of, imagine what that would be like if that was the case, even, then you'd create positive expectations around that, wouldn't you? You'd think, yeah, it's never been a problem for me to attract and date high quality, good relationships. And you'd engage in self-motivating behavior around that automatically. And then you're likely to create a positive outcome and that be your actual reality, where you are creating those opportunities for yourself to attract a great guy and be in a situation where you can choose to have a healthy relationship with any man of your choice, because you've got lots of options in your current reality. So I just wanted to, I suppose, drive the point home that it's so important to be aware of our thoughts, because our thoughts become things and create our reality. And, whether that's good, bad, or indifferent, this is what is happening at an unconscious level. So I just wanted to, really drive that point home, that it's very important for us to become very aware of what we think, because it does have then a knock-on effect on our expectations, and then also ultimately our behaviors, and then our results. So I want you to sit down and think today about where might you be putting your focus. Become more consciously aware of where your focus is going, because usually if we've got negative experiences happening regularly in our lives, that all comes from our own thinking. And I like to explain it that we've got sort of like, just to simplify things, we've got two sides of the coin where we can choose to operate. We can either choose to operate from our mind and our thoughts and our thinking, which is all from a place of ego. And our ego is there for a reason. It does play its part, both in being good, bad, and indifferent. But quite often, if we are in a place of fear or lack or worry or doubt, that is coming from a place of ego. And that is going to create more than likely negative results as to what's manifesting in your current reality. And it usually means that we're focused on external things. He or she isn't doing this, that, or the other, or this situation is not unfolding in the way I currently expect, and I'm looking for external validation, and therefore not trusting my own internal validation. So if your focus is more in your head and you're connecting with your ego, you're more likely to be living, in a place of fear or doubt or worry, and then creating that for yourself. What I'd like to consider is to connect more internally, connect with your heart, connect with your soul, connect with your intuition. And that is what's going to serve you very well. That is, instead of connecting with your ego, that is connecting you back with yourself. And I don't know what your current beliefs are, but I think majority of us usually have the belief in something greater than ourselves, not necessarily, from a religious background or context, but, we do, for the most part, the majority of us do believe in something greater than ourselves, whether that's source, the universe, God, spirit, whatever you want to call it, and it's that place internally when we connect with our soul, when we connect with our heart, when we connect with our intuition, that serves us very well. There is that, I believe anyway, there is that sort of higher, greater power that I refer to quite often in my podcasts as the universe or source, that is there to guide us, and it's always got our back, and it's there to show us what needs healing, and it's also there to guide us on what is our destiny, what is our fate, but ultimately as well to connect us with ourselves so that we realize who we truly are, because we actually are very powerful beings. And we tend to not realize that because we think that life is happening to us rather than for us. And, we become victims of, as I say, connecting more with our minds and allowing our ego to put us in a place of fear, doubt, worry, lack. And then that is our reality. Whereas if we actually become more conscious and start to observe our life and start to become a witness to what we're thinking and observe when, we're connecting with those negative thoughts and catch them. I'm not saying that it's easy to start with, it takes practice, but the more aware you become of what you're thinking, the more power you'll bring into your life and be able to catch yourself when you are going down that negative rabbit hole and bring yourself back into internally connecting with your wisdom, with your heart, with your soul, your intuition, whatever you want to call it, and feel safe. Because I think the biggest thing, especially for women, is to feel safe regardless of what our current situation is. We don't need actually anybody in terms of a romantic partner, for example, to make us feel safe. We can create that safety for ourselves, and the way we create that safety for ourselves is by going within and connecting with that source, connecting with that power, and connecting with our own intuition and knowing it for ourselves that we are safe. And then that's what we create externally as well. But it starts with ourselves, is what I'm trying to say. It all starts with ourselves. Once we're in a place where we've practiced consciously catching ourselves when we're being negative and changing that focus and realizing that we do have the power to create our own reality, and that reality can be great if we have that focus. We don't need to be victims in this world, and you don't need to actually think to yourself, oh my gosh, I've suddenly realized I do have the power to change my life, but I haven't been doing it. Why haven't I been doing it? Don't beat yourself up, because we don't know what we don't know until we do. This awareness isn't taught in schools. We don't very often have parents who are necessarily great role models, and some of us are lucky enough that we do, but they don't know everything. And life is a journey. Life is a gift, and all we need to do is, if we are realizing that we are in that mindset of fear, doubt, or worry, that we are then allowing our ego to run the show, and catching ourselves when that's happening is the important thing, and not beating yourself up for allowing yourself to go there. We are human after all. It is common in the personal development world, and certainly in the spiritual communities, to refer to ourselves as, we are spiritual beings having a human experience. And I do buy into that, and that we are spiritual beings having a human experience, and that we're all here to learn how to access who we are, and access and become more aware of our true authentic power. And that starts with being more observant and listening to ourselves and our self-talk, and understanding, is this serving me, this self-talk that I'm currently engaging in, or isn't it? Is it negative thoughts I'm catching myself thinking, or isn't it? And if it is, then know that that's your own ego stepping in it. And our ego's there for a reason. Our ego, when we think back to Stone Age times, for example, it was there to protect us. because quite often we was in danger of predators, other animals that might be seeking us out as prey. So we need to have, to a degree, the ability to access fear sometimes for our greater good. But in our modern world, for the majority of us, there's no need to be in that fearful state. So it's always worth checking in with ourselves. Is this my ego that's at place that's putting me in this fearful state? Or am I truly, when I connect with myself within, safe? And more often than not, in the present moment, we are always safe. So be mindful that when you do take yourself down the rabbit hole of negativity and feeling fearful, that comes from our ego. It comes from focusing on past events that have been and gone, that we need to release, heal, and let go of. Or we're connecting or worrying about future which hasn't happened yet, and there's no point in worrying about anything that hasn't happened yet, is there? The logic dictates that, that's no need for us to worry about anything that hasn't actually happened yet. And quite often, 90% of us do worry about things that are never going to happen. So there's no point in worrying about future events. And again, it's about catching ourselves in those moments and realizing that, let me bring myself back to the present moment, center myself, take a few deep breaths, and realize in this present moment, I'm actually safe. I'm safe. And I think that's a key word for the majority of us to keep tapping into, whenever we find ourselves going down the path of being in negative thoughts. Bring ourselves back. Take a few deep breaths and know that you're safe. And then from that place of safety, know that then you now have the power to do that all the time. We can always create our own little safe haven for ourselves. And it's just about awareness, catching ourselves when we start thinking and believing negative things are true, when maybe those things are just things that we believed in the past but aren't necessarily true for us today. And today we can let go of that, because what we thought in our past based on our experience then doesn't necessarily have to be true for us now. So we don't need to carry that if it's not serving us in our current life. So for example, if you thought in the past that there are no good men out there because that was your experience, it doesn't mean that that's got to be necessarily true for you today. That might have been your thoughts or your experience based on your past, based on your childhood, based on your previous relationships, but it doesn't necessarily have to be your focus or your thoughts or your beliefs about what is true for you today. Because if you do make that your truth today, then that is exactly what you're going to create for yourself. Because as I said at the start, where focus goes, energy flows. So if you're always focused on that negative thought that there are no good men out there, then that is exactly what you'll keep creating for yourself and keep affirming for yourself, and that will be your future reality. And if you don't want that to be your future reality, then we need to nip that thought in the bud and think, yeah, okay, that was true for me before, but it's not true for me now. What's true for me now is that I have a clean slate. I don't need to accept that as being my current reality, my current thought, my current belief about my situation. I can change that and focus on what I do want rather than what I don't want. So sit down today and think about, where might you have been putting your focus, and has that been serving you? If it hasn't, then look at what that thought was, that belief, and think about, how can I change that? How can I question that more and more to destroy that thought, destroy that belief as not being true for me going forward, and not being something I want to carry going forward. Because the more we question it, the more we can release it. So if you find that you have been thinking something that hasn't been serving you very well, and you want to make sure you get rid of that or lessen its impact subconsciously, then make a note of it and then question it. Question why that should be true for you today. Keep questioning. Just because it was true or you believed it to be true in your past, it doesn't have to be true for you today, and you want to release and get rid of it and focus on then what is it that you do want, and make a note of what is it then that, if I don't want this as a thought or belief, then what is it that I do want? And then make that your focus, because then you'll attract more opportunities in your life to have a positive expectation around what you do want. You'll engage in more self-motivating behavior. And all this goes on subconsciously. We're not even aware that these things happen underneath the bonnet, so to speak, in our minds. And we'll get more positive, excellent results and outcomes. So I hope this has been some useful information for you today to think about, and that you'll be able to do an exercise around this that's going to change your current reality. If your current reality hasn't been fulfilling for you and you've not felt, particularly in a great space, and you've wondered why that is, then hopefully some of these insightful pieces of wisdom will have enabled you to change all that and at least start to make some progress towards creating a different reality and more positive reality for you going forward. So on that note, I'll leave you with true love starts with opening our hearts. And until next time, with love and gratitude, goodbye for now.
Thanks for listening to the Hearts Entwined podcast. You can follow Lyn via the Facebook group 2 Hearts Entwined, or search Lyn Smith, inspirational speaker, at LinkedIn, or email lyn@hearts-entwined.com. That's lyn@hearts-entwined.com. Remember, true love starts with opening our hearts.